What's going on, Ambitious Vet? Welcome to another episode of the Ambitious Vet Show. I'm your host, Chris Hoffman. I'm a Marine Corps veteran, surviving sales trainer, author, and award-winning entrepreneur who realized immediate transition education expires when you desire more than just your basic needs being met. On this show, we dive into the trenches with today's top subject matter experts, share inspiring transition stories, and provide master classes to equip you with the realistic perspective on how to reach your full potential post-military. If you haven't already, go ahead and put your earbuds in, listen up. It's time for you to get the golden grenades you need to break through the new levels of success in your life right now. Today's show is going to be brought to you by At Ease. At Ease was created to solve your travel challenges by building a better way to book and stay for federal and military personnel and families. Whether you're bridging the gap during PCS moves or traveling for your job or duties, their easy-to-use website and booking engine helps cut through federal travel regulations red tape and ensures you never come up short on reimbursement again. At Ease is both federally approved and provides a hassle-free reimbursement process that meets the federal criteria. Learn more at www.pcsatease.com. Again, that's 3 W's.pcsatease.com. Also, the link will be in the show notes below.
It's time to get into the trenches, dig into your purpose, and fire up your life fulfillment. The Ambitious Vet Podcast starts now.
What's going on, Ambitious Vet? We are right back inside the trenches this week with Bryan Stewart. Bryan is a board director, CEO, founder, and former U.S. Marine Corps Infantry Officer. He has held executive leadership and board roles in a variety of companies and other organizations. His professional experience spans leading global teams and businesses across multiple industry segments, mostly in the healthcare products and organization types. Including privately held, private equity-owned companies such as Ameripath and public companies such as the Titan Medtronic that you may have heard about out there. But the cool thing is with Bryan, he works to lead by example with compassion, humility, strength, and a genuine sense of humor. Him and his wife reside in Birmingham, Alabama, right now. And, what I love most about him, Ambitious Vet, is he leads with principles and values. Wherever you go to look up Bryan Stewart online, there's three major words that are out there. It's leadership, character, and results. And I love every single one of those words. But Bryan, are you there, man?
I'm here. Glad to be here. Thanks for the invite.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for applying to be on the show, man. You're a busy guy. You got a lot going on. You've done a lot with your life since getting out of the Marine Corps as an infantry officer. And I couldn't be more honored to have you on the show, man. So please fill the gaps inside the introduction and potentially let an ambitious vet that's listening to this know more about who you are that they may not know about you, man.
Yeah, well, again, thanks for the invite. Thanks for the intro. It's always awkward, at least for me, hearing other people talk about your background. Yeah. I think you nailed the high level. I think the most relevant things maybe for your listeners are more recently, I've become an entrepreneur, I think, which is the title of this show. I've been working for other people and lots of different company types, as you mentioned, but over the last 2 years have really gotten bit by the entrepreneurial bug. I've gotten involved as a founder, joined a startup studio, and really have just dove in, head, feet first, whatever your analogy is, into that whole world, have learned a lot. And so far, knock on wood, I've been pretty successful in starting a company, getting some early funding, and hopefully getting a product on the market, early next year that can help save some lives. The other thing maybe of note is, my passion for serving others that have served, veterans or veteran spouses. I like to include the spouses with veterans because I think, as probably a lot of your listeners know, people who have served in the military know it's a tough road to hoe to be a military spouse, particularly if you're with someone that is deployed a lot, which for the last decade or two, that's been most people. So So anyway, very passionate about helping serve other veterans and spouses, whether they're in transition out of the military or whether they're in career transition or whether they want to get into healthcare or any other sort of segment that I could be of value. So that's another strong passion for me.
Yeah, well, welcome to the world of entrepreneurship. And one thing I admire about you too, having all this, huge executive background in a variety of different healthcare companies, you're still in the beginner's mindset to go on LinkedIn and gain licensing and credentials around basics of raising capital, stuff like that, man, which is showing just the humility aspect of what it takes to go and make the impact you've made from a private and a public sector as far as an executive and leader to now going back and learning how to humble yourself and gaining the new, doing the new MCIs to get the more weight on the collar. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think that's in my view, a critical life skill, a critical leadership skill is being a humble student, being a lifelong learner, whatever your phrase you want to pin on it. For me, I'm always looking to learn something new. I was literally just an hour ago on a webinar about launching a venture capital firm, something I may or may not do, but hey, I was like, that sounds fascinating. And it's a free program. So anyway, to your point, I think anyone listening, if you're not doing something literally every day to sharpen your axe, learn something new, build your network, you're kind of missing out. And the great news is there's so many resources available, particularly for veterans, but really anyone who's interested in becoming an entrepreneur. Lots of programs, depending on where you live, there's all kinds of things available, but it's like anything else in life, you get out of it what you put into it. So if you spend the time or invest the time, I think you can find great mentors, great tools and resources to help you learn whatever you want to learn.
Yeah, being resourceful is one of the key things, man, to develop when you're getting out and knowing where to find that stuff. So before we get into all that awesome sauce and the key topic, I want to go back to Marine Corps officer, right? Days and, how was that like? And then also, what was your decision as far as getting out? Like, what was that process for you? So an ambitious vet that's listening to this that may be an infantry officer may just be like, man, like, what was his decision-making process of getting out? And what was that initial knee-jerk reaction of like, holy shit, I'm not going to have a paycheck on the 1st and 15th of the month?
Yeah, happy to share that. I think for me, I loved literally every minute I was in the Marine Corps. Granted, my period of service was before the protracted conflicts that we've just gotten out of as a country. But nonetheless, had a great experience. The defining factor for me wanting to get out, my brother was also a Marine Corps officer. He's a Naval Academy graduate, supply guy. So we would always, friendly kid each other about him being the supply pogue and me being the dumb grunt. But, anyway, so I saw my brother and my two best friends. So the three closest men, friends in my life, I saw all three of their marriages basically go up in flames over a 12-month period. And not to say you can have an awesome marriage and great relationships with your family while serving. I know guys or gals who have done it. But for me, when I met my wife and we decided to get married, that's when I really began the thoughtful process about, do I want to continue on my Marine Corps career or is now a good time to transition? So short story is when I met my wife and got married, that was when I decided to transition out. Parallel with that was just excited about what the civilian sector might hold. I'd always been interested in healthcare before going in the Marine Corps. Actually, if you would likely talk to anyone that I went to high school with, they would have probably told you, my plan was to be a physician. That I did I was like a healthcare nerd even in high school. So I did internship at the hospital in high school. So anyway, that's what interested me. Fortunately enough, when I was getting out of the Marine Corps after I made that decision, long before the internet was sort of active and there were all these resources and mentors available, I used one of the military specific recruiting firms, a firm called Cameron Brooks, which, at that time when I got out was specialized only in junior military officers. I think since then they've expanded to, not only officers, but enlisted folks as well, which I think is appropriate. So anyway, I would encourage listeners who are listening to this, who maybe are 4 years in, 7 years in, is to really think about what's most important to you in your life. What kind of family do you want to have? What kind of relationship do you want to have with your spouse? granted, we need people to make the sacrifice of staying in and being deployed and all that. And thank goodness for people that do. But just go in it with it eyes wide open. And then I would say, if you do make a decision to transition, again, it goes back to our previous conversation, just take advantage of all the programs that are out there. One thing I want to hype for sure is I've been a Veterati mentor. It's VETERATI is the platform. I've been a Veterati mentor, I think going on 5 years. I would definitely encourage anyone who's transitioning or even who's already out, who's looking to network, is to check out Veterati. I'm probably closing in 150 mentors or mentees that I've had conversations with on Veterati. So platforms like Veterati, I mean, there are tons of programs, MedTech, Vets, American Corporate Partners, you name it. There's, again, a quick Google search, you can find more programs than you can shake a stick at that vets can take advantage of and entrepreneurs can take advantage of. And then I guess the last one I would mention is SkillBridge. You know, I wish SkillBridge was a program when I was getting out. And for listeners who don't know, SkillBridge is basically a Department of Defense program where during your last 6 months of military service, you can get approved to go do an internship at a company while still receiving your full military pay and benefits. So the medical device startup company I have called HDO Health, we recently got approved as as a SkillBridge partner company.
That's huge.
And we're literally recruiting SkillBridge interns right now. I've had probably a half dozen conversations in the last 2 weeks, and we're hoping to have a transitioning military member on our team, next month.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And for being like a seasoned healthcare executive like yourself, just unpackaging what you just said, why go after active duty members, right? Like what's the intrinsic value that you see, and why are you so urgent around like, hey, SkillBridge and sourcing them while they're still in?
One, I think it's just the personal passion of wanting to pay it forward and recognizing that people that, we don't have a draft. So everyone that's serving is serving by choice, generally speaking. And just personally feeling a deep sense of gratitude for those that answer the call, those that continue to answer the call, and just wanting to help others who have served. I can't really, put my finger on when that started. It wasn't something that was immediate right when I got out. It's probably something that I've evolved to, maybe even over the last 5 years, really getting passionate about helping other veterans, both through the things I mentioned and through other nonprofits or what have you. I think the value in hiring veterans, or veterans, even if you have any inkling at all to be an entrepreneur, I believe veterans have all the right DNA to be outstanding entrepreneurs. You know what I mean? Just from the way we are taught, the lessons we learn, generally speaking, kind of my 3-word catchphrase, leadership, character, and results. To me, that embodies a lot of what the military is about, and a lot of what veterans bring to the table as entrepreneurs. So both where I live currently and other programs, actually the venture capital firm I want to start is specifically to help veteran entrepreneurs who live in the Southeast who want to start a healthcare company. That's going to be my niche. And my pitch is, hey, here's great people with great ideas, developing technologies that save lives or improve the quality of life. If you're going to place a bet on a company, to me, that's a pretty safe bet versus, the next gee whiz app that does this or that, So
yeah. Because we know how to execute, we're resourceful, and we know how to do a lot with a little too, to stamp that on top of there as well.
Absolutely.
We can be a little too pessimistic at times. We don't think about how it can go right, but that kind of evens everything out when you get people that are more optimistic. But thanks for sharing all that. And I would really kind of like to transition into like a great topic, because one thing that we were talking about in the pre-interview is just some things around dealing with setbacks and failures and just learning how to own your journey. Right. I think that's so powerful for so many veterans that want to hit peak leadership levels, like you have achieved getting out of the military, but don't understand what it actually takes to do that. Right. Hence the branding of the Ambitious Vet Network. It attracts big thinking, growth-minded vets, but we also, once they come into like our content, our platform, stuff like that, we're giving them the realistic perspective, like, hey, yeah, you have these big goals, but you lack the human capital to achieve those goals right now. So let's build you up. So in that context, please share some setbacks and failures from you getting out as a United States Marine Infantry Officer to finding your way throughout the healthcare world and what you had to learn to actually reach peak level leadership positions.
Yeah, it's a great question. I could probably talk for hours on that, but I'll try to divide it into two sort of views of the question, one really personal and one kind of more general professional advice. Maybe I'll start with really kind of both. But I think one thing, like when I talk to a lot of my veterani folks that I've connected with, one of the things I pretty much told every single one of them, and kind of what you mentioned, is just own your journey. When I got out of the Marine Corps, I'd been in 6.5 years. I got out feeling like I was behind, that I was chasing this invisible boogeyman. I had to, and, like, unlike, or probably like a lot of other Marines and or infantry folks or whatever the MOS, I was hard charging type A kind of a guy, wanted to, take charge, whatever the proverbial statement is. I won't say it in the podcast, but you get the idea. But what that resulted in is me really forcing me to answer two questions to myself. One, what am I chasing? And what am I running from? And I think it took me a first decade out of the military to kind of really get honest with myself about, okay, what am I chasing? So the end result of all that is really accepting as soon as you can, where you're at is where you're supposed to be. You're not behind. Do not compare yourself to Joe Blow, who got out 6 months or a year ago, who's now, an associate at McKinsey or Bain, or is now XYZ role. Do not compare yourself to anyone else. Where you're at is where you're at. And where you go is really up to you, depending on how hungry you are, depending on how humble you are, depending on how much time and effort you're willing to put into learning, into networking, in my opinion, really drives the outcome. Now, granted, it's like anything in life. There are strokes of luck that come into play, both good and bad. I've had some of both, some really things that have just kind of fallen into my lap, and also some situations that, didn't play in my favor, where one example is, being at a company at a senior level, basically at the officer level of company, having a leadership change. And then shortly thereafter, literally walking in one day and saying, hey, you're out of here. Even after having like a record-breaking year, having a great team, having good results. So the other thing I learned from that was that I had to adjust is not being judgmental about other people that were in transition. Another piece of advice is, don't assume just because someone is moving from spot A to spot B, or they may not be exactly where they want to be, that it's their fault or there was something they did or didn't even do. I've learned sort of the hard ways. The further you go, the higher you go in organization. Sometimes it's literally could be the change of an investor, the change of a board member. You get a new CEO, a new whatever, and things change. And, people move seats very frequently.
Yeah. I would just share something on that, and then maybe we'll unpackage some of this meat that you've already kind of spit out at us. And it's this, for me, whenever I got out, I was a mid-level sales manager for an organization, software marketing company. And I think I've shared this on the podcast before, but to your point, new, different leadership coming in. There was a huge company out of Canada that acquired us, and they brought in their turnover leadership team and a new VP of sales and everything like that. And as soon as first thing he did when he walked through that door was he tore down all of our core values of the organization. And being a Marine, I was like, what the hell?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I'm like, what, now we have no values, no principles. And sure enough, 8 months later, it was just so metric driven, numbers driven, which isn't a bad thing in an organization like that as far as turning it around.
Right.
But, they stopped focusing on people, and the turnover just went through the roof for entry level sales reps. So to your point, man, just as easy as it is for new leadership, changing the culture of the company can really impact stuff. So that has been a failure and a setback for yourself. And, it sounds like, so what are some strategies or tactics that has had you own your journey throughout that process to make sure you're moving and, moving upwards in that situation?
Well, I'll get very personal here. A couple of things that I've struggled with, that I've had coaches for been to counseling for, you name it, is some of it from my own upbringing is two primary things. And I'm hoping this is useful for at least one listener when they hear this. And one of them I've already touched on. One is just being raised in a house that's very judgmental. So learning to let go of my own judgment about people and things. Another huge thing I struggled when I got out of the Marine Corps was, as we all know, the leadership bar is pretty high. The expectations are high. Generally speaking, you don't succeed as a Marine Corps or any military officer, if you're not a good leader. There are exceptions, and we probably all can point to at least one that we know. But generally speaking, you've got to walk the talk to get promoted and, continue to achieve in the military as an officer or as an enlisted person, or either one. So anyway, my expectations coming out were probably way unrealistic. So, when I joined a company, whether it was my boss or the CEO, I was always comparing probably like the best leaders I experienced in the Marine Corps, thinking, well, this guy is a CEO. That's kind of like a battalion commander or a commanding general. And there really was no comparison. So I was always disappointed. I was always wanting more. I was always expecting more. So the takeaway for listeners is I had to calibrate or recalibrate my own thinking around, number one, who the heck am I to judge anyone about anything, period, full stop. Number two, yeah, I was in the Marine Corps. I just got out. What the heck do I know about business or being a CEO or being a, you know what I mean? So I kind of had to get real with myself and say, kind of be quiet, do your job, prove yourself. And over time, good things will happen. But that was a struggle for a long time. The second one, very specific for me, was managing my nonverbal communications. And this is ultra specific, but I've seen this and observed it. And folks, I think a lot of the folks in the military are used to, my last couple of years were at Parris Island, and, everybody was, it was all about, the nonverbal knife handing the recruits. And, so for me, it was not having my nonverbal communications match what I thought I was portraying. So an example would be being in a conference room or boardroom or whatever, having a meeting with, cross-functional peers. And, in my mind, I'm thinking, well, I'm listening to this lady or this guy. I'm leaning in, I'm engaging, I'm nodding in the affirmative. That's what I was seeing in my own mind. What they were seeing was me either, sitting with my arms crossed or my eyebrows furled, or almost like, I was going to come across the table at them and choke them out during the meeting. And it really took me some time to figure out that was an obstacle for me to, being more effective as a leader and then getting where I wanted to go as a leader. So I had to get very specific about how do I change that. So again, it goes back to being a good student. I studied, okay, what are the roots of some of nonverbals? How do you manage your nonverbal communications? And I literally had people that were my, close associates or friends that I recruited to become my mirror. And, we had like a little sign they would give me when I was doing either, when I had I'm going to come across the table, look at you.
The resting bitch face or something.
Exactly. The good news is, I think with that feedback and just studying on my own, I believe I was able to overcome that. And I'm much more aware of how I come across to folks, because it is really, really important. Both the verbal aspect of communicating and the nonverbal. So anyway, that's a very specific example that, those two things I've wrestled with. I don't want to say I've mastered them, but I've come a long way. And I still focus on both those pretty much in every interaction.
No, thanks for giving us your framework that you've used and just repurposed it throughout different setbacks and failures, and learning how to own your experience and those moments, right? Not judging people that are in a transition in life, and also nonverbals. Like so many, there's so many examples in the Marine Corps where you got to hold your bearing. If you smile or anything, you're screwed. And, it's just, you think about that, man. And you're just like, holy cow, like, hell, man, when I'm resting and just looking at people, am I smiling? Am I like showing soft body language? Most of the time for me, probably not. And ambitious vet, I would ask yourself, like, check in with your nonverbals, right? And ask for that feedback from your counterparts at work, your team, your household, your family, stuff like that. Ask them for that feedback so you can continue to, open up a space for vulnerability and transparency for people in front of you, so they're not scared that they're about to get knife hand or something.
Yeah. And I think it can be, veterans can be intimidating to people that have not been in the military service, for right or for wrong. I think just the way veterans communicate with each other, the way they interact, the way they may carry themselves. And the veteran may not even realize that it's intimidating someone. So I think that the other thing I learned was just modulating my approach, not becoming soft or like, hey, let's hold hands in every meeting, but really just becoming smarter about it and realizing that the environment is different. So it's like putting your military mindset. If you're going to fight a battle in, this kind of environment, you want to adapt to the environment. You don't want to wear your green camouflage to the desert and whatever your analogy is. So
right.
Being a good student, I think the underlying point of all these things is really thinking about how to be a humble person and leader. That's something else I probably struggled with, was just kind of thinking way too much of myself. Had success, did this, that, and the other. It's like, well, no one really cares. You know what I mean? Maybe my wife, maybe on a good day, you know what I mean? So I think that's the other really, really important thing, is particularly people that may have served in the military a long time, had a great career, maybe have some even, significant personal decorations, whether it's whatever your accolade is. I would think the other thing for people to realize is, number one, kind of get over yourself. Those things might matter in the military. You're going to get very little credit or appreciation unless you're being hired by another veteran for those in the civilian context. So be humble about your experience. Be humble about the leadership opportunities you might have been provided. And particularly in how you translate that and make it real to people that may not have a context to understand what it means to be, a company first sergeant or a battalion commander, or a squad leader for that matter.
That's good to think about, right? And before we transition to the last segment of the show, like, I don't know, from your experience, and like just from over here thinking about that kind of thing, because pride was definitely one of my challenges getting out of the Marine Corps as well. And it still is to this day. So I have to learn how to humble myself on a daily basis. And that's why me and my wife plug into, church and just do a variety of different other things to keep us
that's key.
Humble, keep us connected to the source. You know what I mean? But, in the military, we're carrying our leadership on our collar. But it seems like when we get out of the military, we're in the civilian world. It's what have you done for me lately culture?
Yes.
I don't know. I mean, what are your thoughts on that? I mean, I've never been like a top executive for a healthcare company. I've mostly made it up to a mid-level manager role within the corporate world now, a startup entrepreneur, right? But what is your take on that from a corporate culture standpoint, and also like, getting into the entrepreneurial world?
Yeah, I think it really goes back to the humility and realizing that, you may be the chairman, the founder, the CEO, whatever. But I guess how I would describe it is I look at leadership as a real sacred responsibility and a gift, that if you are given the opportunity to lead, you need to think about and prioritize and act as a leader as if literally lives depend on it. Even in the civilian context, it's not like you're leading people into combat, but people's families and their livelihood, their emotional stability, their financial stability, you are responsible. So don't ever take it lightly. Don't ever underappreciate it. Don't ever take it for granted. And as I mentioned, don't ever assume that, if you're transitioning out of the military, that anyone's going to care what your rank or job or what your fit rep might have said. No one's going to care. I can almost, with 99.9% certainty, no one is going to care. And even from that point further, I tell a lot of folks transitioning, think about, when you're applying for a job or talking to like maybe the first point of contact who's an HR person, they're likely late 20s, maybe early 30s, HR professional, more than likely not a veteran. And unfortunately in our culture may even be, at the very worst or very least, they're not going to understand, kind of the context of your military service. At the worst, they may even be hostile or sort of anti, well, hey, we're not going to hire a veteran. They have PTSD or, they kill babies or whatever it is that may be.
That's real. Yeah, that's real. Yeah.
I think people need to understand that. And anyway, I hope I'm answering your question. I think that's things to think about. But
yeah, no, I think
in the end, leadership is a gift, and you got to treat it as such.
No, and I think another thing I wrote down was just having something at stake in your leadership. That's what I just took away from what you said. Like, have something at stake, like you were leading in the military, right? So I love that takeaway. So I want to go ahead and transition to the last segment of the show. I know you got a strict timeline over there, Bryan, but thank you for your time so far. But, we want to transition into the last segment of the show, which is your last save rounds, right? And how I like to put it is there's two veterans, one veteran, and there's also an active duty military member that listen to this show. The active duty member is, to your point, you're going through the SkillBridge program. They're getting out, they're ambitious, they have big goals, but they don't know what's about to hit them. And they're realizing that career readiness tools like interview prep, job fairs, stuff like that, may or may not get to the deep bullet wounds that they need to be getting ahead of. And then the veteran has been out for a few years, realize career readiness is only the first step towards, reaching their full potential post-military. What would be some last save rounds that you would give to that veteran to help them kind of break through to new levels of success in their life post-military?
Maybe I've got 3 save rounds, one for both groups, two. And that round is never underestimate the power of networking. And I'll even say maybe change the word from networking to relationships. So if you're still on active duty or you're in your first job or whatever, or you're looking to start a company, don't underestimate the power of just meeting people and telling your story and being humble about it. So pragmatic tip, if you're not on LinkedIn and you don't, curate your LinkedIn presence on a regular basis, whether that's daily, weekly, whatever, in my opinion, you're missing the boat. For better, for worse, that's where the professional world goes to see who's who and what's what. If I have a call with someone, that's the first thing someone does is goes to their LinkedIn. So my analogy for that is think of it as like a garden. If you want to harvest, you can't just plant seeds today and expect to harvest tomorrow. You've got to plant them. You got to pull the weeds. So you may have people in your network you need to get rid of that aren't any help, or just clogging your inbox with, hey, can I introduce you to this or that? The one and done sales pitch kind of thing. And you got to fertilize it. So, my whole point is like, you got to tend that. And it's a living organism. So the more seeds you plant, the better care you take of it, the better your harvest is going to be when it's time for you to reap the harvest. So that's for both groups. Sort of related for folks that may be on active duty is just encourage folks to not wait till the last minute, meaning like, I'm starting terminal leave in 4 weeks. Oops, what do I do? And I my belief is that, lots of commands and or most bases have good transition programs, pretty formulaic, but my encouragement would be start sooner rather than later. In my opinion, 18 months is not too soon. 12 months, you're kind of right in the window. Closer than that, you may be cutting it short to do all the things you need to do to plant all the seeds you need to plant, to really be prepared to move into the role you want versus taking whatever you can get, when you transition. There is a difference,
Yeah.
And then for folks that may be in a job currently or looking to become an entrepreneur, for the group that wants to become an entrepreneur, I would just say, just do it. There's never going to be a great time. No one's going to come twist your arm and say, hey, you'd be a great entrepreneur. I think if you've got that seed or that drive within you, do the homework. There's tons and tons of accelerators, programs, you name it. The other part of that is just, there's tons of other people just like me, whether it's on the Veterati platform, folks that are in your network that are willing, able, and really want to help with nothing expected in return. So if people listening to this want to connect with me on LinkedIn and say, hey, can you introduce me to this person that works at this company? I do that all the time. And I find great value, and it gives me joy to be a connector. So part of my reason I've developed the network I have is to help other people and help connect dots. Like, I know someone that does this or someone that works there or whatever. So
yes, part of your gardening analogy too, man, where you're deepening the relationship by giving them connections too, which is an incredible skill that, can or cannot be learned depending on the personality type. So that's great. That's great. Yeah. So
and the last thing I'll say, if I could, one parting round for everyone listening is just my little catchphrase. I didn't come up with it, but it's pay it forward. So if you're someone getting out, I tell this to every Veterati mentee as well. hey, my only request for you as a mentee is when you get on the other side of your transition or you get that new job, sign up to be a mentor and pull someone else along with you. Don't just take and never give. So if you're not giving back, if you're not serving somehow, some way, turn this podcast off and go freaking find somewhere to invest in someone else, with nothing expected in return.
That's great advice. Bryan, where can an ambitious vet that's listening to this right now go learn more about you and learn more about what you're up to in life right now?
Probably the best place is about my LinkedIn profile, Bryan with a Y, Stewart. I live in Birmingham. So if you look in LinkedIn and Bryan Stewart in Birmingham, that's me. My startup company is HDO Health.com. You can find me there. I'm easy to find. All my contact info is on LinkedIn. So I would tell people, go to LinkedIn, find me, and we're good to go from there.
That's great. Well, Bryan, thanks so much for joining the show, man. Thanks for coming from the Marine Corps, from the yellow footsteps to coming out and spreading out the breadcrumbs for other ambitious vets to follow, man. Thanks for joining.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for what you do as well.
The Ambitious Vet is available on all popular podcast platforms. Go to vettrainingcoaching.com to subscribe, rate, and share with fellow vets.
Today's show was brought to you by At Ease. At Ease was created to solve your travel challenges by building a better way to book and stay for federal and military personnel and families. Whether you're bridging the gap during PCS moves or traveling for your job or duties, their easy-to-use website and booking engine helps cut through your federal travel regulations and red tape and ensure you never come up short on reimbursements again. At Ease is both federally approved, and provides a hassle-free reimbursement process that meets the federal criteria. Ambitious Vet, to learn more, go check out www.pcsatease.com. Again, that's www.pcsatease.com.